Hi, welcome to another reading vlog, and today's gonna be an exciting one. It's gonna be all about vampires. I'm so excited for this vlog because I have always adored vampires. Like, I don't know, it's always been my paranormal creature of choice. I feel like everyone has one, and I always like to blame Twilight for it because it was very formative. But if I look back on things, I was obsessed with vampires even before that, and I still am. And very luckily, vampires are having a bit of a resurgence lately. So I have a lot of books in my TBR, including vampires, that I just really want to read. And like, this is gonna be a 5-book vlog because typically I do a 3-book vlogs, but honestly, even whittling it down to 5 was so difficult because I'm so excited about so many books. But I do have 3 physical books and then 2 ebooks that I will be reading. So I have Crave by Tracy Wolff, which a Dutch publisher split up in 2, but I'm gonna be reading both of these, so I have the full complete. And this came out a couple of years ago and was very popular on TikTok and was very much pitched as the new Twilight. So I've been always very intrigued about this series. So when I saw this in my library, I decided to pick it up. And then we also, of course, because it's the era of romantasy, need to read a romantasy. Even though I feel like that also might be a romantasy, I'm not sure, but this one I'm sure of. And that's The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. Actually, fun fact about this book, I had heard so many great things about this, and I've always been on the fence if I wanted to read it. And then at a certain point, I don't know why nobody told me about this before, but at a certain point, someone said in their review, this has vampires in it. I was like, wait a minute, this isn't Faye? And I went to the bookstore and immediately picked it up because yes, that's all I need to be convinced of reading a book. And I've been so hyped to read this ever since I bought it, so I'm very glad that I'm finally getting around to doing this vlog. And then a release from this year is Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil by Schwab, which I don't know a lot about, just had it's lesbian vampires, and that's again all I need to know. And I really love Schwab's like other books, so I am very excited to read this. Again, I've heard so many great things about it, and I got it close to release, and I've been meaning to read it since as well. So finally getting around to doing this video. Another more recent release is Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is one I got an ebook offered to my library, and this is more horror leaning, which I don't have in my stack, so I thought that would be a fun perspective on things as well, especially considering this is also, you know, written by a Native American author, and I feel like that also will bring an interesting lens on vampires. Oh yeah, I'm also reading A Steeping of Blood by Hafsah Faizal. This is the second in a duology. I forgot the name of the duology, but the first book is A Tempest of Tea. And this is a YA like fantasy duology, and I enjoyed the first book. It wasn't like my ultimate favorite, but I really loved like kind of like the vampire aspect to that book, so I'm very excited to conclude this duology with this book. This is also a very new release but in fact I don't have it yet. By the time, of course, you'll see this vlog, I'll have it, but there's another ebook I'm reading to my library and I have it on hold, and it literally says that it's coming in the 25th of September and it's currently the 22nd, so 3 days until my library officially gets it, which I'm assuming is also when it's going to be released. I don't know, so I'm very excited to be reading it as well. So yeah, we have a good mix of different kind of vampires that I feel like, because I feel like there's going to be more literary reading, we have a like romantasy, and I think because it is being called the new Twilight, there's going to be like classic paranormal kind of vibe. And then of course we have horror and a YA in there as well, so I feel like we have very different vibes going on and a lot of different vampires. I'm so excited for it. I don't know the proper order which I'm going to read everything in. All I know is I'm going to be starting on Crave. I'm so excited for this. Like I said, this is split into 2 books, so I have found the halfway mark of both of them, and then those are going to be my updates. So not exact quarters, but like once I've reached half of part 1, I'll update you, and at the end of part 1, and halfway through part 2, and then at the end of part 2. And honestly, these are relatively short books, but if you put them together, we're over 600 pages, so that makes me a bit nervous. But like, this whole TBR is full of chunkers, so what the fuck am I talking about? Anyway, I'm gonna go read now. See you later. Hi, so I'm halfway through the first part of Crave, which means I'm a quarter of the way through the full book. I think we agreed on that. Anyway, I'm really enjoying it so far. So let me first give you a synopsis for this book. In this book, we follow Grace, who a month before the start of this novel, her parents passed away, and the only family she has left is her uncle and her niece, which is the daughter of the uncle. But the uncle is the principal in this like very elite boarding school in Alaska. So, you know, she now has to go to that school because that's the only family that there is for her. They can take care of her, and she has to go to that school, live there. And I believe she's from San Diego, so like big change, a big change in scenery. And as she gets there, things are a little bit odd, but she immediately kind of connects with this guy named Jackson. It's spelled with an X, so do you still pronounce that Jackson? I don't know, I've never seen it spelled that way. Anyway, but she comes across Jackson, who is like this dark booty guy she kind of immediately has like a connection with, and he also kind of keeps seeking her out, but she very quickly discovers that he is typically the guy that everyone stays clear from. And yeah, something I know because I read the back is that this, and also because like context clues at this point, but this school is actually, this boarding school is a school for the paranormal. So our main character is actually the only just like regular human on high school. For some reason they're keeping that from her. I generally, just pure safety wise, don't understand why they're not telling her she's living with vampires, werewolves, dragons. They just anyway, that's besides the point. I don't know, I feel like there is gonna be a reason for it, but it doesn't seem very safe. So I think that's funny. But yeah, I'm having a fun time with this book. Like I said, it is very cheesy to the cringy at sometimes, but I'm having a blast. Like, I'm not telling you this is like a great book, but honestly I'm having a good time so far. Not even a whole lot has happened. She's just arrived at the school and is just kind of finding her footing there, and obviously she is dealing with grief as well because, you know, she just lost her parents a month ago, so it's a big adjustment. But I feel like so far this book is mainly just our main character interacting with other characters, and them and the author just having fun making references towards the fact that all the other characters are supernatural creatures without mentioning anything. Like at a certain point there's a character who has been hinted a couple of times at being a dragon. I don't know how that works. Is he like a shapeshifter that turns into a dragon because he is human? I don't know, but like he's a dragon basically. And it's been hinted at a couple of times, but at a certain point it like the main character mentions that he all of a sudden had like an ember in his eyes, and it's like, stop. That's the cheesy shit I'm here for. I'm having such a good time with that. But I have to say the characters are not my favorite. I do have to say that. I feel like the characters are very wishy-washy, where just like at one moment they're like acting all nice and smiling and happy, and then like something gets mentioned and they're just like completely turned off and angry and like pissed off at something. I'm like, huh? how did the switch happen? And again, I do think this is part because they are like not being themselves. They have to hide the truth, but them being like, all this is for all the side characters, not necessarily for Grace, but them being wishy-washy like that is just like very confusing to read. I'm like, why are you getting upset all of a sudden? Like, why does this make you angry? Like, what's going on? And then also something I think is funny is that Jackson keeps telling our main character that like she has to keep her head down, or otherwise she won't be safe, and she's attracting too much attention to herself and she won't be safe. But then like no one will tell her why she won't be safe. Like she just thinks like, I'm just in a regular high school. That's why I don't get what they're not telling her, but oh well. But I think that's kind of funny. Grace is kind of annoying though. I don't love her, but there's just one thing about her that's annoying. That's that she has no sense of self-preservation, like at all. Like this girl just decides to go wandering outside of the school, which is dangerous because, you know, I'm presuming just based on the way they talk about things that there is more paranormal stuff lurking out there as well, not just within the school, that could potentially be dangerous for Grace if she's out there on her own. But also, even if you discount that, which she doesn't know about obviously, it's freezing cold. Like it is abysmally cold. And the risk of hypothermia is extremely high. Yeah, this bitch decides that it's a good idea to go wandering off on her own in a place where she's never been, with temperatures that she's never been in. Like this girl has never seen snow in her entire life, yet thinks it's a great time to just wander off on her own in the Alaskan wilderness in November. You know, no sense of self-preservation. And there's also like this conversation that she just had where I left things off, where she told her cousin about meeting Jackson and like having some conversation with him, and her cousin the niece goes, what, like stay away from him, like he's dangerous, what did he do to you, like what's going on? And Grace constantly like, no, he was very nice to me. And the niece is like, Jackson, are you sure we're talking about the same person? Because he's like very dangerous, everyone is scared of him, like stay clear of him. Like if he's nice to you, it's because you want something from him, like it's not a good deal. And she literally in her inner monologue goes, oh, my niece was known as ma'am, like this guy, the teenagers, was known as guy for like 5 years, because they're in her 5th year, so I'm presuming they've known each other for 5 years. I don't know, but like she's known him for several years. I've known him for 2 days. But what she said about him and about how the entire school sees him, that's ridiculous. She's exaggeration. She doesn't know who he really is. I do. Really? Really? You think this girl who has known this guy for at least a year, more so 2, 3, 4, I think 5, honestly, but like at least a year, because they do mention things that happened over a year ago as well. So he's known him for at least a year. You've known him for 2 days, like I said, yet you think you know him better than she does, than the entire school does. And like, I do get that there is something about people's like prejudices and like assumptions about people, but like, this is your niece that you've been very close to your entire life. You're supposed to trust her, yet you're talking about this guy that she's known for years, you've known for 2 days, and you're like, she's being ridiculous. Like, there's no way that what she's saying is the truth. Like, there's no way. And that makes her a little bit of an annoying protagonist, but like, also, I'm laughing, you know? You see how much I'm laughing during this update? That's how much I'm laughing reading this book. And it's not because it is trying to be a funny book, even though there are some good jokes in here. I have to say that. But it's a delight. I'm loving this. So there we go. Hi. So I finished part 1 of Crave, and honestly at this point I totally get why people don't necessarily like this one, because so far not a whole lot has happened. Like, it's just kind of like teenage drama stuff, and even then it's been like very low-key. But the way this ended, I am very hopeful that more plot will actually start getting introduced in the second part. But I am left loving. Like, not necessarily loving, because there are definitely moments that frustrate me, but I'm still having such a good time. I don't know what else to say. I do have to say that the romance between Jackson and Grace is very insta love. I have to say that, but to be fair, I also don't hate it. Like, just keeping in mind, like, kind of like the rest of the sphere that I'm reading this in, it's not an egregious romance. I'm not like, what the fuck are we talking about? I'm having fun with them, but it is very, very insta love. So be aware of that. But for the rest, I do think this is a lot of fun. The only thing that is like the most frustrating to me so far is that Grace still doesn't know anything. And at this point, I won't say much, of course, because I don't want to spoil you because I'm halfway through this book. But Grace has definitely gotten in situations, like very dangerous ones, like near death. And I still not telling her anything. I'm like, you can still believe that she's safe for not knowing anything. And then something also gets insinuated about her mother's death, which also makes me believe it was vampires, which maybe that is why they're not telling her anything. But this is really not, it's really doing her such a disservice. It's kind of frustrating me that she went through such dangerous things and they're still like, nah, she doesn't need to know. That's kind of annoying to me. I am here covering part 2, and I'm gonna delve into this one. This one is slightly shorter than part 1. There's like 302 pages, I believe, while part 1 was 315. But I'm very excited to delve into this one because I feel like that's gonna be like the meat of the story. But like I said, I've already had a blast with this part, so this can go on for me. Sorry for the lazy update, but it's late and I'm tired. But I am halfway through part 2, which means I'm 3/4 of the way through, kind of, because it's not exact maths, but you know. So I'm finding it hard now to discuss my thoughts on this without spoiling anything, but let's just say we know a bit more about the paranormal, or clued in, let's say. I have to say it, even though I like learning about these things, the way it is being delivered to us right now is just extremely info dumpy. It's just the main character kind of asking a question and then us getting like a whole history told to us by someone else. And that isn't necessarily my favorite, even though there's definitely some drama in there, some things that I think is interesting. I also have to say that there's one thing though that does not make sense to me. I just feel like, again, I can't properly talk about this without any spoilers, but unless we're missing some info, I feel like one character's behavior and something we know about them and something that happened in the past, let's just say I'm talking about Jackson, something with him doesn't make sense just based on something in his past that he talked about. And I can't say the past thing because I will spoil things. And also something that's frustrating is this girl has made her entire life about this man. I hate it. And I also don't think is the greatest considering this is a YA book. Like, teenage girls should not like model their behavior after the main character in this one at all. So yeah, that those are my thoughts. So I do feel like my enjoyment is just dwindling a little bit, just because we're out of a bit of the melodrama and we're getting more into like the stuff, and it's not necessarily bad, but like it's less entertaining, I guess. I do think at this point I was debating with the first part of this would be like a 4 or 3, because like objectively it's like really not good. But I was just having such a good time with it that it might be a 4, but with how this is going I genuinely think this might be a 3. Hi, so I finished it. I told you that this book was gonna have to gag me to get a 4-star, and it did. So this is a 4-star. It's also the reason why I finished it now, because almost immediately after I stopped talking to you, the action got going. I was like, oh my god, what's happening? And my heart was racing, and I was so invested that I didn't want to put it down. So I finished it. It was like 2 minutes after midnight right now. I'm exhausted, but I finished it, and I have to say that even though the action was like really good, it kind of came a little bit out of nowhere, kind of like the twist. I feel like there could have been just a little bit more done to kind of make it not see like what's going out of nowhere. And logically, when I think about it more than 5 seconds, there are a lot of holes in there, just things that could be explained a bit more. But I didn't get. I was on a ride and I was going, and it was so much fun. And yes, my 4-star rating is purely for the entertainment, not for the quality. I want to preface that. I feel like that's obvious though by my review so far of it, not my thoughts on it, but it has been so much fun. Okay, so I am halfway through The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, and guys, this is some good shit. I don't really get why this has been so popular, because I was supposed to be a quarter of the way through, but I just didn't want to stop reading, and I kept reading, and I stopped here yesterday, and then I'm gonna read some more today, and I'm very excited to. But in this book we follow Araya. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, but we follow Araya, who as a kid was rescued by the Nightborn vampire king, and basically he adopted her even though she's human. So she has always grown up around vampires as a human, and like her like dad basically has raised her to be like very hyper vigilant and very careful, because as a human she is always like prey in this world. And now at the start of this book she's entering this competition called, does it say it on the back, the Kajari? Again, if I butcher any names, I'm so sorry. But she's entering a competition called the Kajari, which is held every so often. I actually don't know how often. And it's held by the goddess of death. And there's like different rounds to it. And it's like a life or death situation. And the one survivor of it, like the winner of it, is like the prize is a wish from the goddess. And she wants to participate in this so that her wish can be basically to tie her to her father. It is like a very specific and rare ritual in which 2 people can like tie themselves, and you'll receive the power of each other, and your lives are kind of intertwined that way. She wants to do that with her dad so that she can become more powerful. And it's easier for her to survive within this world, because her dad is like one of the most powerful vampires out there, but like she needs a wish from this goddess to be able to do that, because it is such a like rare thing, that the goddess has to grant herself. And then there's like a like if she wins, like she'll for sure grant it, because that's kind of like the thing of it. And this competition is of course like very very brutal, and even though she does do a good job at it, she does have like, she is injured easier than the vampires are, obviously. So at a certain point she needs to team up with someone, and it turns out that the only person kind of want to team up with her is this vampire who comes from like an enemy territory to her father's like kingdom basically. And like she doesn't really trust him fully, but she's like, that's my only way to survive, so I'm gonna have to do it. And yeah, they partner up, have great banter, and I'm presuming that's gonna be the love interest just based on how things have gone already. And yes, I'm having such a good time with this book. I absolutely flew through like halfway through this book, and my copy is 284 pages. I flew through this is almost 300 pages, and I read it like it was nothing. It is so addicting of a read. It's so gripping. It's also pretty high action, but not necessarily like big action moments. Because the competition is like in different trials, and we do spend time in between the trials as well, where all of the like competitors have to live within kind of like the same house. So the main action is in these moments where we're actually doing the trials. For the rest, action wise, is actually not that big, but we do keep moving the plot the entire time along, and it is going at like not a quick pace, not very fast pace, but it is, you know, it is going at like a steady pace, I would say, which makes it so addicting and easy to read. I also just really like Oriah as a main character. I think she is very interesting, and also at the point where I'm at, something else big just happens, and I feel like with that and then the potential love interest, I feel like this might be like a switch of perspective coming for her, which I'm also very excited to see, because she has been raised very rigidly, and she's always, you know, with very strict rules by her father to like protect her, and she obviously loves her father very, very much and trusts in him, but you can already tell there are like certain things where she's like, but and I feel like that's gonna turn a little bit more just based on things that we're doing, and I feel like that's, I mean, it's a typical journey for, I feel like, a lot of romanticies or like YA fantasies. This is a romantasy, but I feel like the way it's done in this one is just really interesting, and I'm very excited to see that unfold. I also really like the guy, I forgot his name though, Wayne. I really like him as well. I think he's also a very interesting character. I feel like we have only like scratched the surface of who he is so far, and I also really like his dynamic with Oriah. I feel like their dynamic is really good together, and I'm already shipping them, even though like I feel like it is this, I wouldn't necessarily call it a slow burn, because obviously I'm only halfway through the book. I don't know what the rest of the book is gonna happen, but so far it's definitely felt more like a slower development between them, where they do have like great banter, and she is starting to experience like a little bit of attraction, where she's like, whoa, what's happening? But it's not like anything big yet of feelings and anything, so I do think there's gonna be a bit more slow burn, and I'm really enjoying that as well. I feel like a lot of fantasy just like delves head first into the romance, and I really like how this one is giving us more time to like have it burn a little slower. That's what a slow burn means. And yeah, I'm having a really good time with this one. I don't know if it's gonna be a 5-star, but like it can be, it definitely can be, and I'm very, very excited for that. So I just finished The Serpent and the Wings of Night, as in I quite literally just put this book down. 5 stars. Oh my god, this was so good, especially that ending. I mean, shocked, like genuinely shocked. I'm still processing everything that happened at the end. Oh my god, this is so good. Yes, I really love just like the world that was built in this book. That was really interesting, and we mainly focus on like these trials in this book, and I thought those were also really interesting. And I also just really loved Oriah as a character. I thought she was a very interesting main character, very strong main character, really liked her. But also, especially when it comes to these trials, she's obviously physically at a disadvantage because she's the only human in this trial, and the trials are also more engineered for vampires because that's, you know, the typical contestants. But she's like so intelligent and so smart as well. Like, of course, she's also been trained. She did go into this with training, you know. It's not like she physically can't do anything, but like, you know, she is just like biologically, let's say, at a disadvantage. But the way she still like outsmarts so many of these trials is so interesting. And then like her and Wayne's connection, I really love. Like their romance is really good. Like they just form very slowly, actually form this like connection with each other, and it's so great to see. And also again in these trials, like when they're actually fighting together, it's also a big opponent of that, and it just and then like the more this book continues, kind of like the more of kind of like a wider plot, let's say, starts seeping in, and that was so interesting as well. Like I said, that ending, I am so excited to read this. I want the sequel like right now, because I need to know how this continues. Because what? This doesn't even end on that much of a cliffhanger, but just so much happens towards the ending, and I'm still, you know, reeling. This was phenomenal. Highly recommend. Highly, highly recommend. Excuse the shitty angle, but I'm sick. Also, if there's noise going on outside, there's construction. I hate it too. But I'm reading A Steeping of Blood by Hafsah Faizal. And this book is split into 3 parts. I thought I'd do an update at the end of each part. And I just finished part 1 and I'm feeling fine about it. This is the sequel to A Tempest of Tea, which is a YA fantasy book that I read earlier on in the year. And it follows Artie, who runs a tea shop, which by night actually also exists as a place where vampires can come and drink blood, basically. Like, she serves blood instead of tea. And she and her brother Jin have run this business while also kind of been in the business of keeping secrets, finding blackmail material on people and stuff like that. And at the start of this book, like someone they rent that place and the owner changes, so it gets bought by another person, and they want to shut down the tea shop. And unable to prevent that, Artie and Jin kind of have to assemble a team to be able to do this heist that will be able to get them the tea shop back and everything. It's more complicated than that, but yeah, that's the thing. And then we follow Artie and Jin, and then we also kind of POV from Flick, who is a noblewoman who also has a second life as a master forger. So yeah, that's basically the setup, and she gets part of the heist team. That's how she's involved. But anyway, that's the premise of the first book, and this is the sequel. And I quite liked the first book. I do feel like it was a bit underwhelming, but I liked the fantasy setup, and then with the way things ended in book 1, I was very curious to see how the story is going to continue. And book 2 just came out, which I told you about in the intro, I believe. So I immediately delved into it, and I'm feeling fine about it so far, just like I did with the first book. I just am finding it a bit difficult to get into. I don't know, something about it just isn't fully grasping me, and it could be because I'm sick, but my brain's functioning fine, so I'm presuming that's not it. And yeah, I don't know, I do still think that the story that we're doing in this book is interesting, and I'm curious to see how things are gonna develop. But I do feel like most of this book so far has been set up, and maybe that's why I haven't fully gotten invested in this. But yeah, I don't know, I'm missing that gripping feeling, hopefully that will come in part 2 or part 3, hopefully. Okay, so I just finished part 2, and I figured out why I'm not connecting with this book. I feel like oftentimes with series, kind of the first book does a lot of work kind of setting up the characters, making you attached to them, setting up the different relationships between them, developing that, making you invested in that. And I just realized that was my main issue with the first book in this, is that it did not do that. I felt like the characters all felt very underdeveloped, and their relationships all felt very underdeveloped, and I wanted more of them. And that's what's keeping me from being fully invested in this book, because typically when you do that character work in the first book and you get more action focused in the second book, it's alright because the reader already has that attachment to the characters. But because I never got that in book 1, when we go more action focused in this book, I find it hard to care, which sounds weird because I do like these characters. I just think I'm not super invested in them because I do still think that they're pretty one-dimensional, and their interpersonal relationships feel extremely underdeveloped. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, because those definitely are underdeveloped, but also just kind of platonic and sibling-esque type of relationships. It all feels undercooked, let's say, and therefore I just find it so hard to really kind of be invested in everything that's happening, because I'm just not attached to the characters in that way, if that makes sense. And I do think the storyline is interesting, which is what's the most frustrating part, but at the same time I also think it doesn't really do anything special. It does kind of feel like something I've read before, just with different detailing, but just the general plot kind of feels familiar, let's say, and not necessarily in a way that's positive, also not that negative, but because I kind of feel, because sometimes when you read a storyline, it just feels very familiar, it can feel nostalgic, and it can make you along for the ride in that way, and it doesn't feel in that way. It just kind of feels a bit generic fantasy, and therefore it's also just not really engaging me either, the plot so far. So yeah, but I do have to say that the last part of book 1 was my favorite part, so I'm hoping maybe the last part of this book will also like amp things up a little. So I feel dreaded to be in front of a camera. I don't know why. I'm feeling better now, but this phase has just not been wanting to do it. I don't know what it is. I've been putting off filming this clip. I apologize. But therefore, I have a lot to update. First off, I finished The Steeping of Blood. Maybe that's also why I've been against filming this, because I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. And I feel like that was pretty obvious on my updates that it wasn't going to be much higher than this. I just generally think the story was so predictable, and like it didn't do anything that I thought was like unique or different, and I lost interest in it the more it continued. And I do have to say that towards the ending, like some more like emotionally hard-hitting things happened, and I could recognize that, but also I felt nothing. I did not care, and I feel like that truly cemented this as a 2-star rather than a 3, because I couldn't. And I feel like main reason for that is what I mentioned earlier, not me being sick, but just the foundation for these characters and the relationships not being laid well enough in the first book for the second book to work the way it did. Because I do feel like if I was invested more in these characters, I would have cared a little bit less about like the very generic plot. But combine the two and I just was bored. And I hate to say that because I will still defend that first book with my life, because it does, even though I gave it 3 stars, I don't think it deserves like the hate that it got. I still think it's a very enjoyable read, but this just was not for me. I did also start Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil by Schwab. And this is how I can for sure say that A Steeping of Blood I didn't just dislike because I was sick, because I started this immediately after finishing a book and I was invested from like the first page. I am obsessed with this already. And I'm only a quarter of the way through. Where's my bookmark? Here it is. Hello. And here's the thing, what's annoying about this is that because I was like so demotivated to film this update, I was like, you can't read past the quarter mark until you filmed this update. So I haven't read anything for a couple of days because I flew through this first quarter and I've been itching to get back to this, but this is how bad my not wanting to film this is that I haven't done it. But yeah, I'm gonna read you the back because I feel like it does a better job explaining this book than I do. So there we go. 3 young women, their bodies planted in the same soil, their stories tangling like woods. This is a story about hunger. 1532, Santo Domingo de la Calzada. A young girl grows up wild and wily, and Mariah knows she can only ever be a pawn in men's games. So when an alluring stranger offers an alternate path, Mariah makes a desperate choice. This is a story about love. 1827 London. A young woman lives a cloistered life on her family's estate until a moment of forbidden intimacy sees her shipped off to London. Once there, a beautiful widow offers her freedom, but at what cost? This is a story about rage. 2019 Boston. College was supposed to be a fresh start. That's why Alice moved halfway across the world. Then an out-of-character one-night stand leaves her questioning everything. Alice throws herself into the hunt for answers and revenge. This is a story about life, how it ends, and how it starts again. Yeah, this is often also described as toxic sapphic vampires, and that's all you need to that's all you need to sell me on the book. And I used to say this just a quarter of the way in. We've only been introduced to Maria and Alice, so not yet the middle perspective. So I wonder when that's gonna come in as well. We've been introduced to them and kind of gotten a lay of who they were, a little bit of like the situation they were in before they got turned, and both of them, like Maria has just gotten turned, Alice has just realized something is gone on. She doesn't fully, like, you know, 2019, she doesn't really fully believe she's a vampire just yet, but like she knows something's off. She fed for the first time, and Maria is like has just been turned and is going full vampire. And with her perspective, I'm already totally getting the toxic vampire shit, because yes, she is not necessarily playing nice, and I feel like so far in the 2 perspectives, I prefer Maria's storyline. I feel like her rampage so far has been so much fun, and she's like has no mercy, and that's also something I enjoyed, that she just has a lack of guilt, because I feel like that is very common with kind of like female characters, is that they can go on a rampage but they have to feel super guilty about it, which is not something that men have to do. So I enjoyed that. The bell just went. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. But I was talking about this book and I don't know where I left off, but I think I wrapped up my thoughts on Maria's storyline. The other storyline we're following is Alice, which is modern day, and I'm not connecting with as much. I do have to say I really like with the way that this is written. You obviously see a difference in writing style between Maria and Alice, but I do feel like Alice's writing, like the writing in Alice's POV, even though it does feel a bit more modern and different, it also still has like that dramatic gravitas to it, which makes it kind of like blend together really well. And like that writing, I don't know, I feel like Victoria Schwab, like V Schwab, did it very easily within Alice's POV, like very modern and like simple, I'd say, but it still has like the same kind of a flair to it as Maria's does, if that makes sense. So I really like that element to it. But yeah, I feel like when it comes to Alice, we have gotten like little glimpses, but like she has been like a little bit in a daze, like figuring out what's going on and stuff. And we also have gotten a few flashbacks to her past. So I'm very interested in that POV, but I feel like we're less established in that than in Maria's. So I like it a little bit less at this point, but we're only a quarter of the way in and I'm very intrigued to keep reading. And there is a third POV I'm still to get, so who knows what I'll think of it. But that being said, we have had a POV very early on here from Lottie, which was like a couple of pages, and it's with this girl that Alice hooks up with, but like that's all we know about her. And that she's not the third POV of like the actual story. So I'm genuinely curious as to it's why that was included. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to keep reading, so I will be doing that, and I will be checking in with you once I'm halfway through. So I'm halfway through Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil, which is 266 pages into it. I'm still obsessed with it. Like I especially just am adoring the writing in this, and then I have to say, Maria's POV is still my favorite, just because we spend like her sections are also bigger than Alice's so far. But I feel like with Alice, we're still like in the same week, while with Maria, we've gone over like centuries and years, and like we get these little snippets from different points in her life. And I just think that right now it's just more interesting. But Alice's storyline definitely still has me intrigued, especially because we get so many flashbacks to when she was a kid, and I focus very much on her sister. And I'm very curious as to why that is, because in the present time we have not met her sister, so that's there. But something I also find so interesting about this book so far is that both Alice and Maria, kind of when they get turned, are left alone. I feel like oftentimes in vampire media I've been consuming throughout my life, I feel like oftentimes you get turned and there's like someone that you come across that will guide you and teach you the beings of being a vampire. But that's like not a thing in this book at all. Like they have to figure it out themselves, and especially in Alice's POV, like the moment when she got turned and she first goes to class because she's a college student, and she just gets so overwhelmed by everything because her senses have been so heightened. I thought it was such a strong scene, and I really love how it's done, and it really shows just like when you're left alone in this thing what it does, you know. And even with Maria, as she encounters more vampires throughout her life, she learns different things from them, different lifestyles and such, and I think that's so interesting. But Maria herself was also like such an interesting character, and I'm loving kind of getting to see her grow throughout these like little snippets we had. And I have to say that little POV that we got early on in the book, I do think I know what that is. I have a guess of what that is, and we'll see. That probably will come into play in the second half of this book. But like so far, it's not like a whole lot has happened. Like with Maria, we're mostly just like I said, we're spending time with her. Like we're getting snippets from different parts in her life where she's encountering different people and different vampires. Mainly, she's teaching herself different things like self-control, like other like vampiric abilities and stuff. And I think that's really interesting. And then just seeing again her character growth, like when she first gets turned, she's like very bloodlusty, and as time passes that becomes less. And her like she's also always been very much a person for solitude, but again as time passes that also becomes less, and she's starting to crave more companionship. And I think all of that is really interesting. And then like I said, with Alice we are moving a bit slower. Her parts are also like much shorter than Maria's are, but we are like still very much like not a whole lot of time passed since we first got introduced to her. But I do think even her experiences are kind of interesting, especially again with those flashbacks. We see different things about her, and now that she's older and like the difference in character as well a little bit, but also kind of things being similar as well, I think is so interesting. Like I said, I'm very curious as to why we get so much of her sister in like past things, why that's relevant, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know, I'm very intrigued by Alice's storyline, but Maria's is the one that I'm like really invested in at this point. But like I said, there has also just been more to it at this point, but there isn't much of a plot. It just kind of feels like with Maria a bit of a character study in a way, kind of like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue did, and like what I loved about that is very present in Maria's storyline as well. But then we have like that modern element with Alice, and again we got so like little of it so far. Actually, if you think about like how much time we spent of these 260 pages, how much time we spent on Alice is actually relatively small. So there, I don't know, I'm very intrigued by it, but I feel like there isn't like much to say about it just yet. And there is supposed to be a third POV that comes into things, and that hasn't happened yet, so I'm very curious how that comes into things as well. And again, I have my ideas about that, but I'm not sure. But I'm very excited to continue reading. It might be that I won't update you until I finish this book, because I don't know how much I'll have to say at a 3/4 mark, but we'll see. Hi, so I am 3/4 of the way through, which is 399 pages. And I have to say, this is hard to talk about without spoiling at this point, but I have to say the third POV got introduced and things have gotten interesting. Like before this, I've also seen this kind of being compared to Interview with the Vampire, and to be fair, I'm only familiar with the show, not the movie or the book. But where we're at right now and the things, some of the things we're doing right now, I kind of get it. Just when it comes to kind of like toxic vampire-ness, you know? And there's actually like one conversation here that reminded me exactly of something that also happened in the Interview with a Vampire show, which was wild to me. And yeah, I don't know, I really am loving this still, and I'm very excited to see just how things are gonna converge, because I'm also seeing elements of that. Again, I'm trying to do this without spoiling, but how Alice kind of plays part into the rest of this, I'm very curious of. And yeah, I'm having a good time. I'm gonna finish this tonight. It's pretty late, but I don't want to go to sleep without finishing this. So the next video you're gonna get from me is me really tired. I already know that, but yes, I have to finish it. So I finished Berry and Bones in a Midnight Toil, and then surprisingly, Do Anyone perhaps I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much, but I do think it is a bit hard to explain why I loved it so much, because it's vibes. It's vibes. I have to tell you that, because I feel like this is very much, it's a very different book from Addie LaRue, but it's like very similar, where we're just hanging out with this character and like it works or it doesn't. And in this book we have 3 characters that we follow instead of just one. I thought it was great. I really loved how it came together, but I loved it. I that was so good. I love the writing in it. I think about, I don't know if I talked about that, but the writing in this is just so beautiful and like poetic, but also like not too flowery. Like it makes complete sense for just the way these characters are and this how the story is. I love it. I love it so much. And then I also just really, I wouldn't necessarily say I like these characters, because at a certain point they go off the rails a little, and there's definitely, you know, there's a tinge of unlikableness to them. It's pitched as toxic vampires, like, of course that toxicity is very present, but I love them nonetheless in a way. Like I thought it was so interesting, and I loved seeing their development throughout the book. And then the ending took me by surprise. It really did. There were some things in there that I absolutely was not expecting, but I really like it. I do think it leaves things open-ended just a little bit, enough for you to interpret things different ways. And I think it's going to be so interesting perhaps to discuss this book with people, and especially that ending, because I feel like there's so many takeaways you can have with it. Like for me, it's very clearly just one thing that happened, but I think other people could have interpreted very easily different way, and I like that it's left open in that sense, but it's also not like too much of an open ending. I do actually think, even though it was very unexpected, it was also very satisfying a little bit. And yeah, I don't know, satisfying but also like deeply sad, if that makes sense. I don't know, I really like that. Anyway, I love this book and I'm glad that I read it. So that brings us to the end of this video. Yes, you heard that right. I'm not reading Buffalo Hunter x Hunter for this video, because in the middle of filming this I got sick, and therefore I accidentally, without paying attention to it, let my hold on that book expire without reading it. And now I put myself back on the wait list, but it's like another month out from me getting back on it. Like me getting it back, and I don't want to push this video too long, and also I read so many vampire books, I kind of want a little bit of a break, so I don't mind. But yeah, I did have a blast doing this, like, and this just proves to me that I've always loved vampires, because it's like the best reading vlog I've gone in a while. Like I have 2 5 stars, a 4, and then that 2 star, but like we don't talk about that, but let's forget that exists. But I've been having such a blast with these videos. I hope you did too, and hopefully I'll see you around next time. Good.
Here I am again, the same old situation. Why does the God thing have to be so complicated? Should